figure stands alone on a beach, staring at nothing but grey. The painting measures just 40 by 71 inches. It hangs today in Berlin's Alte Nationalgalerie, catalogue number A, I 937. According to conservation records completed in 2006, the canvas was originally larger by several inches on all sides before being trimmed at some point in the 19th century. This is not fiction. This is what this painting still reveals. The work is called The Monk by the Sea, painted between 1808 and 1810 by Caspar David Friedrich. On its surface, it appears almost empty. A strip of sand, a band of dark water, a mass of heavy cloud, and somewhere in the lower third, barely visible unless you stand close, a solitary figure in a dark robe. But this painting split opinion more violently than almost any work shown in Berlin during the Napoleonic Wars. Critics called it both a masterpiece of spiritual daring and an insult to painting itself. Some viewers wept, others demanded their money back. Because what Friedrich did here was remove everything that made a landscape painting acceptable. No trees to frame the view, no ruins to give romantic interest, no savage figures to provide scale or story. Just a human being, unprotected, facing an emptiness so complete it looked like the end of the world. And in an age of revolution, war, and collapsing certainties, that emptiness meant something unbearable and true. It is late now, wherever you are. The kind of hour when thoughts drift toward questions without easy answers. If you are finding something here that steadies you, consider leaving a comment about a painting or a museum that has stayed with you. And if you would like more of these night walks through art, the subscribe button is just below. These episodes take weeks of research, and your presence here makes them possible. Now let us step closer. Let us see how a man who barely left his studio in Dresden came to paint the loneliest picture in European art. You are standing in a gallery in Berlin, late March 1810. The annual Academy exhibition has just opened. Around you, walls are packed with historical scenes, mythological allegories, portraits of generals and burghers. Gilt frames touch gilt frames. Every canvas tells a story, offers a lesson, demonstrates skill. Then you turn a corner and you see it. At first, you think something is wrong. The painting looks unfinished. There is so little in it. A beach, a sea, a sky. The proportions feel wrong too. The sky takes up nearly 2/3 of the canvas, pressing down like a weight. The sea is just a dark stripe. The sand is almost nothing. And that figure, that tiny monk, he is so small you almost miss him. He is not doing anything, not praying with uplifted arms, not gesturing toward heaven, just standing there, looking out. You step closer because surely there must be more. Some detail you are missing. A ship on the horizon, perhaps. A bird, a cross. Something to tell you what this is about. But there is nothing. Just the monk. And the infinite grey. The world Friedrich painted into was not empty. It was overfull. By 1808, European landscape painting had become a language of precise conventions, refined over 2 centuries of Dutch masters, Italian vedutisti, and French classicists. According to the Academy's published guidelines from 1805, a proper landscape required multiple planes of recession, a clear foreground with detailed vegetation or figures, a middle ground establishing depth, and a background of mountains or architecture. Light should enter from a specific source and create measurable shadows. The composition should guide the eye through the scene using natural frames such as trees, arches, or rock formations. These were not suggestions. They were rules enforced by purchase contracts and exhibition juries. Patrons wanted landscapes that demonstrated mastery of perspective, atmosphere, and detail. They wanted paintings that told them where to look and what to feel. Friedrich knew these rules intimately. He had studied at the Copenhagen Academy under Nicolai Abildgaard and Christian August Lorentzen, both rigorous teachers of neoclassical composition. His early works from the 1790s show complete competence in the expected manner. Detailed foregrounds, framing trees, proper atmospheric recession. Works like his 1802 summer landscape with ruin followed every convention. But something in him resisted. Letters preserved at the Kupferstich cabinet in Dresden reveal a man increasingly frustrated with what he called the emptiness of mere technical display. In a letter to his friend and fellow painter, Gerhard von Kugelgen, dated November 1806, Friedrich wrote that landscape painting had become a demonstration of recipes rather than a transmission of feeling. He wanted, he said, to make visible the invisible. The invisible was becoming more urgent. By 1806, Napoleon's forces had crushed the Prussian army at Jena and Auerstedt. French troops occupied Berlin. The old certainties of German cultural and political life, already fragile, collapsed. The Holy Roman Empire, which had lasted 1,000 years, officially dissolved in August 1806. Friedrich watched from Dresden as refugees flooded east, as requisitions emptied studios of materials, as the future became unreadable. In his studio notebooks, now held at the Staatliche Kunstsammlungen Dresden, Friedrich sketched coastlines obsessively during these years. He had grown up in Greifswald, a Baltic port town. He knew the flat, featureless beaches of the Northern Sea. In the summer of 1801, he had walked alone along the island of Rügen, sketching the chalk cliffs and the endless horizons. Those notebooks show page after page of horizontal lines. Sea meeting sky, sky meeting sea. Almost no detail, just the division between elements. By 1808, he had made a decision. He would paint that emptiness directly. He would remove everything that gave comfort or orientation. He would put a human figure into a space with no shelter, no explanation, no redemption, and see what happened. The Monk by the Sea began as a different painting. Infrared reflectography, performed by the Nationalgalerie's conservation team in 1999, revealed extensive underdrawing and multiple revisions. In the earliest layers, Friedrich had included 2 sailing ships on the horizon line. He painted them out. There had been birds in the sky. He removed them. The shoreline originally showed more detail, including driftwood and rocks. He simplified it to almost nothing. Even the monk's figure was repositioned, moved slightly to the left of center, and made smaller. Each subtraction was a choice. Each removal made the painting stranger, emptier, more unacceptable by the standards of his time. The work's surface bears witness to Friedrich's process. According to the 2006 technical study, he worked in thin glazes over a relatively dark ground, building up the sky in layers of grey, white, and subtle green-blue. The paint application is remarkably smooth, with almost no visible brushwork. This was deliberate. Friedrich wanted no texture to catch the eye, no virtuoso passage to distract from the total effect. The goal was not to show skill, but to create an experience of space without boundary. The sea is painted with lamp black, Prussian blue, and a small amount of raw sienna. It sits on the canvas like a void. The beach is warmer, using ochre and burnt umber, but still minimal. And the monk himself, barely 3 inches tall on the canvas, is rendered in a mixture of lamp black and bone black, so dark he almost disappears into the beach's shadow. The painting was finished by late 1809. Friedrich showed it to a small circle of friends before submitting it to the Academy. Their reactions, documented in various letters, were immediate and divided. The poet Heinrich von Kleist saw it and wrote one of the strangest reviews ever published about a painting. The piece appeared in the Berliner Abendblätter in October 1810. Kleist said that looking at the painting was like having one's eyelids cut off. He said it was apocalyptic in its audacity. He also said it was magnificent. The sculptor Gottfried Schadow, a senior Academy member, was appalled. In a letter to the Academy's president, preserved in the Berlin Akademie der Künste Archives, Schadow called the work an insult to the traditions of landscape painting. He argued it demonstrated either incompetence or arrogance. How could a painting with no subject, no action, no proper composition be admitted to the Academy exhibition? But it was admitted. And when the exhibition opened in March 1810, The Monk by the Sea became the most talked about painting in Berlin. The public's reaction was visceral and conflicted. Some viewers stood in front of it for a long time, mesmerized. Others walked away after a glance, offended or confused. According to a review in the Zeitung für die elegante Welt from April 1810, several patrons complained to the Academy that the painting was unfinished and should not have been displayed. One visitor was reportedly overheard, saying it looked like someone had given up halfway through. But others saw exactly what Friedrich intended. The critic Friedrich August Schulze, writing under the pen name Friedrich Laun, published a review calling the painting a new kind of landscape, one that portrayed not a place, but a state of soul. He recognized that Friedrich had removed the scaffolding of traditional landscape to leave only essence. The monk, he wrote, was not a figure in a scene. He was the viewer, alone with consciousness itself. This was revolutionary, and it was terrifying. For centuries, landscape painting had been a way to organize the world, to frame nature within comprehensible forms. Friedrich had painted disorganization. He had made visible the experience of standing before something that could not be understood or controlled. In an age when Napoleon's armies were redrawing the map of Europe, when the political and philosophical certainties of the Enlightenment were collapsing, the painting's emptiness felt both timely and unbearable. And then, something unexpected. King Friedrich Wilhelm III of Prussia visited the exhibition. He stood in front of The Monk by the Sea for several minutes. Then, according to the Academy's acquisition records dated April 1810, he purchased it for 300 thalers, a significant sum, though not the highest price paid that year. But the king's choice was a statement. He bought the most controversial painting in the exhibition and hung it in the royal collection. This changed everything. If the king endorsed Friedrich's vision, the painting could not be dismissed as incompetent or frivolous. It had to be taken seriously, which meant its emptiness had to be confronted as intentional, meaningful, perhaps even prophetic. But what did the king see? Friedrich Wilhelm III was not known as an intellectual or an aesthete. He was a cautious, conventional monarch struggling to hold his diminished kingdom together after catastrophic defeat. Why would he choose a painting that offered no comfort, no allegory, no narrative of resilience or hope? Perhaps that was precisely why. Because The Monk by the Sea did not lie. It did not pretend that loss could be easily overcome or that faith provided simple answers. It showed a man facing something immeasurably larger than himself, something indifferent to human need or meaning, and it showed him standing there anyway, not fleeing, not collapsing, just standing, looking, enduring. There is a strange courage in that, a courage without heroics, the courage of simply remaining present when everything around you offers no guidance. Friedrich himself said very little about the painting. He had a habit of deflecting questions about meaning, insisting that the viewer's experience mattered more than his intentions. But in a letter to his friend, the painter Carl Gustav Carus, written in 1820 and preserved in the Carus Nachlass at the Sächsische Landesbibliothek, Friedrich wrote that the artist's task was not to describe the visible world, but to make visible the invisible, by which he meant the inner life, the spiritual dimension that ordinary vision overlooks. The monk is not looking at a physical sea. He is looking into the infinite, into the space where the self meets something unnameable. And by removing every distraction, every comfort, Friedrich forces the viewer into that same confrontation. The painting's influence spread slowly but deeply. Friedrich's younger contemporaries, particularly the Norwegian painter Johann Christian Dahl and the German painter Carl Gustav Carus, understood immediately what he had done. Dahl, who would later become Friedrich's close friend and studio neighbor, painted his own versions of empty horizontal landscapes in the 1820s. Carus, who was both painter and physician, wrote extensively about Friedrich's work, calling it a form of visual philosophy. But the broader art world resisted. For most of the 19th century, Friedrich's work was seen as too stark, too melancholic, too resistant to conventional beauty. Academic landscape painting moved toward greater detail and narrative content, not less. The Hudson River School in America, the Barbizon School in France, even the English pre-Raphaelites all worked within recognizable conventions of composition and subject. Friedrich's emptiness remained too challenging. By the time he died in 1840, largely forgotten and impoverished, his paintings were considered curiosities at best. The Monk by the Sea remained in the Prussian royal collection, but was rarely displayed. When the Alte Nationalgalerie opened in 1876, the painting was hung in a secondary gallery, grouped with other early 19th century German works of minor interest. It took the 20th century to understand what Friedrich had done. After 2 world wars, after the collapse of grand narratives and certainties, after modernism had stripped away representation itself, the Monk by the Sea suddenly looked prophetic. Existentialist philosophers saw in it a visual embodiment of being toward death. Abstract expressionists recognized a predecessor in Friedrich's reduction and his emphasis on the viewer's subjective experience. The art historian Werner Hoffmann, writing in 1974, called The Monk by the Sea the first truly modern painting, the first work to make the viewer's isolation the subject itself. According to Hoffmann's analysis, published in his monograph Caspar David Friedrich, the painting anticipated by more than a century the concerns of 20th century existentialism and abstract art. It was modern not because of style, but because of stance. It placed the viewer in a position of radical uncertainty and offered no escape. By the 1990s, The Monk by the Sea had become one of the most analyzed paintings in art history. Scholars debated its theological implications, its political meanings. During the Napoleonic Wars, its relationship to romantic philosophy and literature. Conservation studies revealed the layers of revision, the careful construction of emptiness. Visitor studies at the Nationalgalerie showed that viewers still stood in front of it longer than almost any other painting in the collection. Something about it refuses to become familiar. You can see it many times and still feel its strangeness, its refusal to comfort or explain. The monk never moves. The sea never reveals what lies beyond the horizon. The sky presses down, endless and indifferent. But there is something else there too, something harder to name. The monk is small, but he is present. He has not turned away. He has not sought shelter. He stands in the opening, in the exposure, and he endures. And somehow that endurance, that simple act of remaining, becomes its own kind of strength. Perhaps that is what Friedrich Wilhelm III saw. Not a message of hope or triumph, but something more fundamental. A recognition that being human means standing before the unknowable, the uncontrollable, the infinite, and finding within yourself the capacity to bear it. Not to conquer it, not to explain it, just to bear it, moment by moment, with whatever grace you can manage. The painting now hangs in a room designed specifically for 19th century German Romantic art. The gallery has soft lighting and walls painted a neutral grey. The Monk by the Sea is given its own wall with space around it. The museum's current label, written in 2015, describes it as a key work of European Romanticism and notes its influence on later abstract art. It also mentions the restoration work and the king's original purchase. But the label cannot quite capture what happens when you stand in front of it. The way the emptiness pulls at you. The way the monk's smallness makes you aware of your own smallness. The way the painting refuses to tell you what to feel or think, but instead creates a space where you must confront your own interiority, your own capacity to face what cannot be solved or explained. Art historians still debate what the monk represents. Is he Friedrich himself, a symbol of religious doubt, a figure of post-Enlightenment alienation? The answer probably does not matter. What matters is that he stands there, looking, and by looking at him, we find ourselves looking too, out into the space beyond certainty, into the vastness that does not care whether we understand it or not. That is a strange gift, but it is a gift, because there is a difference between avoiding emptiness and learning to stand in it, between refusing uncertainty and finding that you can bear it. Friedrich's monk teaches nothing except presence. He offers no wisdom except endurance. And on certain nights, when the world feels unreadable and the future unclear, that might be enough. The painting will still be there tomorrow. The monk will still be standing on that beach, facing that sea. And if you return to look, again, you will find that he has not moved. He is still there, in the opening, in the exposure, still enduring, still waiting for you to join him in that uncomfortable, necessary space where the self meets infinity and does not look away. Fast forward to the present. The Monk by the Sea has become an image reproduced endlessly online, printed on posters, analyzed in classrooms. But something strange happens to it in reproduction. The emptiness flattens, the scale collapses. What feels unbearable in person becomes merely interesting in miniature. The painting needs its physical presence to work. You need to stand in front of it, to feel the sky pressing down, to search for the monk in his smallness and realize how far he is from safety. In 2020, during the pandemic, The National Gallery closed for months. When it reopened with limited capacity, The Monk by the Sea was one of the most requested works. Visitors came specifically to see it. They stood in front of it, masked and distanced, and stayed longer than the usual viewing time. The museum's visitor services coordinator, in an interview for the National Gallery's annual report, noted that people seem to need its emptiness, its lack of answers, perhaps because the painting does not promise that isolation will end or that meaning will arrive. It only shows that it is possible to stand in the opening, to face what cannot be controlled, and to remain, not happily, not confidently, but present, still there, still looking. That is what Friedrich achieved. Not a painting of nature, but a painting of consciousness confronting its own limits. A portrait of the mind standing at the edge of what it cannot know and choosing to stay rather than flee. It is an uncomfortable achievement. But discomfort, Friedrich understood, is where truth lives. The monk does not speak. He does not pray or gesture or mourn. He simply stands, a dark vertical in a horizontal world, and looks out. And 200 years later, we stand with him, smaller than we would like, more alone than feels comfortable, but standing nonetheless, present to the infinite, even when the infinite offers no reassurance. What paintings do you return to when certainty fails? What images hold space for you when words cannot? The question stays open, like Friedrich's horizon. And maybe that openness, that refusal to close the question with easy comfort, is the most honest thing art can offer. The monk remains on his beach. The sea remains unknowable. And somewhere in that stark, unbearable, luminous emptiness, something true about being human persists. Not explained, not solved, but witnessed, held, remembered. That is enough. Some nights, it has to be.